I wish that music didn't like trail off and then there's this like bleak few milliseconds where I'm like, there's nothing coming in. Then that bothers me deeply. Hello, everyone. Hello, Peter Popomo, who I hope I pronounced your name correctly this time. Hi, guys. All of my patrons I see are coming in. So it's James Pressler asked, hello from Chicago. Is this a sweatpants optional broadcast? It is always pants optional, just as long. I just want to be. I want to clarify something. I never there. It's pants optional as long as nobody ever shows me anything that is happening, or as long as there will never be an accidental tubing on this show. It's not okay. Like after that, I'm like, I feel like maybe we should end the pants optional policy, or like clarify it or something. But just, pants optional, pants optional in our minds. Like we can't, there's no reveal of the pants optionalist. Anyway, now that I've made this very awkward for my guests.
But the one warning you gave me is don't start another tubing situation.
No tubing situation. It's like whatever's happening down there, I don't want to, like, it just be happening for yourself. You can, like, I just keep it a mystery, keep it in your brain, keep it between you and Jesus and Sobek, or whatever God you have or don't have. Man, that was not something I expected. Is that, like, maybe I don't know if I'm over that one yet. It's someone. So on my other podcast, we review porns for the plot because I had a normal childhood. Starling just asked, so will you be reviewing that Tubin movie? No, that is, if that ever becomes, oh my God, if they parody that. Whew. So guys, I brought an epidemiologist on today because that needed to happen, because I've been faking being an epidemiologist for you guys, and he's the real deal. So thank you, Gideon, for coming on and joining me.
Pleasure. It's good to be here.
So other than writing really well thought out medium rants in which you explain the pandemic much better than I do, what do you do for a day job? Could you explain this for my audience?
Well, I actually mainly work in chronic disease epidemiology. So I like to say that in previous years, I used to say that my job was diabetes research. Now I just say epidemiologist, and everyone knows what that is.
Yeah.
It was a great going from, are you a skin doctor, to, oh my God, you're amazing.
Interesting. It's interesting way to say, yeah. So COVID has to have been like, how has COVID shifted what you're doing? It's either in your day job or in your free time, with your because I see a lot of what you're doing on with your Medium articles. How has COVID shifted your time, basically?
Oh, enormously. I mean, my day job it's kind of added to because I still have all the diabetes work and the chronic disease work. Yeah. And then I'm also doing a bunch of COVID-related stuff because, of course, that's the biggest issue these days in epidemiology. Yeah. And my free time is also COVID research. So it's, it's just added to it generally. It's what I needed in my life.
It's needed, I feel, I'm not sure. That's a funny, interesting way of phrasing that one. So Starling said as having type 2. Thank you for your service. I wanted to get into just dive right into this. Right now, we're kind of on wave 1.3 or wave 3.0 of COVID. I'm not sure how to phrase that. Like, because right now Europe is kind of catching up in cases and daily new cases to the US. Was this expected? What was expected and what was unexpected for what's happening right now with the pandemic, with daily new cases?
I think depends what we mean by expected, I guess. I think a lot of people were warning in your summer. Sorry, I have to remember, I'm in Australia, so it was my winter, but your summer, that if all of the restrictions in the US and in Europe were relaxed, that we'd probably see new cases. And it's given that there was a large underlying transmission, a large number of people still transmitting, even at the lower points in most of those countries, it's not surprising, I guess, that there's a resurgence in cases once everyone relaxed enough. That being said, I don't think anything this year has really been predictable in the way that we'd like to think of it. Like you could say, yes, we thought a lot of people have pointed out that, you know, a pandemic was inevitable. Sure. Could we have reacted differently? Yes. I mean, I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, it's there was something that you mentioned before we went live about how it could, you know, wax and wane during the, you know, when it got colder. Given that we've seen this transmitted you know, in different countries when, you know, both during the winter and summer months, and it seems to be more of a factor of where people are, whether they're indoors or outdoors, and people are, you know, are staying indoors and people are visiting during the winter months, and people are going to be like, well, it's just going to be 6 people at grandma's house does it seem is there a chance that it being winter during the in the northern hemisphere now, does it seem like there's a chance that could increase transmission during these upcoming months?
So there's been so much discussion about the seasonality of the disease, and I think it's my basic answer is it's hard to say, even at this point. Yeah. So there was a recent study that I saw that found that there wasn't any temperature-related seasonality to the disease. So whether it was dry or hot or cold probably isn't going to affect transmission a huge amount, but there's probably still an amount of behavior-related seasonality, and that's what you see a lot with influenza. And I think it's not unlikely that there will be more transmission in the winter, but it's still hard to say how much that's going to impact the disease rates in lots of countries.
That's the fun part about this is it's a lot of we don't know yet because it's a new disease, and good luck out there. Please wear a mask.
Yeah, as one journalist told me, whenever she asks epidemiologists questions, we always respond with, it depends. And I think that's very true. It's like the catchphrase of epidemiology.
But here's the thing, my audience would prefer you to say, it depends, than you to say, we absolutely know this is going to happen, because that's the honest answer here, right? And the honest answer is complicated in a lot of these cases. And it's giving it to the people straight and saying, we're not sure. This is why you have to keep taking these precautions, and that will at least continue to reduce the chances of transmission, rather than saying, this is how it's going to be, you're just screwed, just lose the like it's better to say, these are the possible things, we're not sure. It's a better way to approach it, and it's a better way to approach SciComm.
Absolutely. So, and I think quantifying or talking about uncertainty is really important, because it's true that we don't know. Yeah. A lot of people really think that seasonality is a huge issue. I think we can say with some certainty that it probably isn't going to completely prevent a pandemic or an epidemic of COVID if it happens in summer. But whether there's going to be a huge resurgence in winter because it's winter, anyone's guess. Now, also, I just noticed someone said hi from Melbourne. Hello, Australians.
Whereabouts in Australia are you again?
I'm in Sydney.
Nice.
New South Wales.
I went out to Sydney a few years ago for Skepticon, and it was a wonderful time. Now
I saw you.
I
was in the crowd.
Did we meet, or am I? It's because I'm sitting here going, I feel like I would have remembered if we had. I'm like, please don't let me be the jackass who doesn't remember you after having had actually met, But I'm like, okay. There was a question I wanted to grab, and I just clicked on it to show it in here. And I think this is a please help me respond to these people. How would you respond to people claiming that masks are more dangerous than helpful? In particular, the video going around that interviews OSHA PPE, quote, certified experts who claim that masks don't help protect and can make you more sick from breathing CO2 and increasing your own viral load. I'm sure you've seen these. What are your? I haven't seen. I don't know if there's a more recent video with quote certified experts. Have you seen these videos, and what are your thoughts?
I haven't looked at. I try not to click on some things, I think, these days. Anything that's got masks worse than masks dangerous in the title. I don't think there's any debate that masks are not dangerous. My wife is a surgeon, and she wears a mask every day, 5 days a week, all day.
Thank you for her work, by the way. Thank her for it.
I will. She's a veterinary surgeon, so it's particularly.
But still, having to go in and deal with it's a quick comment. Simon has entered the chat. Sorry, just have to end every time. Moving on, but
I think
she
my
wears a mask
mother-in-law
every
is also
day.
on the chat. So hi, Debbie.
Hello, mother-in-law.
Yes, I don't think that there's any reliable or genuine question about whether masks are dangerous. The questions still are how beneficial they'll be, and what situations mask mandates will be helpful. And it's not so much about whether you wearing a mask is helpful. It's more about whether a policy decision is helpful and how we define that, because that's a much more difficult question.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get people to mask only in low risk situations, but you enforce that with a ton of fines, is that a good decision, as opposed to encouraging people to wear masks when it will be most beneficial? The public policy is always more complex than the simple idea of whether something prevents aerosols from getting out your face or not.
Yeah, right. And it's funny because I know early on in this, we were, and this is something that I've just touched on in here before, early on, because we had such a shortage, at least in the US, that it was like that. I think even if we had thought, yeah, these might help, like part of the reason I think that people were telling people not to wear them was, because we didn't want them buying up all the N95s that essential workers in hospitals so desperately needed. But it definitely bungled the messaging on, on perhaps you should wear a cloth mask that you can make at home. And I feel like if we had gotten that right at first, that could have prevented a lot of misinformation and people arguing over if masks work or not. And I wonder if we have another if we have another pandemic with another coronavirus disease in our lifetimes, if the memory of the arguments on masks are still going to be used against the use of masks, like say 20 years from now with a new coronavirus strain.
I think what a lot of Asian countries have shown is that the memory of using masks is remarkably long lasting. SARS was indelibly imprinted in those countries' minds, and people wore masks as a much more normal thing. I reckon that's going to be one of the cultural changes, is that people will start wearing masks when they're sick more often.
I hope so. It's the one thing that does worry me is that there are people that are kind of like in 1918, there was an anti-mask league. Are there still going to be the anti-maskers, or are they going to have hurt themselves so badly with COVID-19 that, say, when COVID 2038 comes out, they're going to be like, maybe this one will kill me, and they'll have smartened up by then. It's grim, possible. But it's worrisome that we've had that, we know that there was an anti-mask league before the last time there was a plague like this that came through, and yet happened again. But it's disinformation. It's it'll kill you. So trying to go through and grab a few questions. Brett Campbell just asked, challenge studies for COVID, ethical or not? A UK trial is doing this. They've also stated only small doses will be given to reduce risk. I'm not sure if this really reduces risk. Your thoughts?
Challenge studies are a very interesting question, and to be honest, not something that I'm super read up on at the moment. Generally speaking, they'd only be done with ethics approval from a full human research and ethics committee. I believe only done on young, healthy volunteers who understand the risks, probably a very low risk. And again, yes, it's more like variolation. So giving a small amount of the disease rather than a large infectious dose to hopefully reduce the severity. Yeah. That being said, I'm sure some people will raise ethical concerns as they always do, but I think they're being very, very carefully conducted. So, yeah.
Someone just asked me, how's the vaccine? I'm in the trial, so I don't know if I got the vaccine or the placebo, and I won't for at least another a couple weeks from now. I'll be able to go and just take an antibody test and see because I definitely haven't had it yet. Even though it's possible that every single person in my house of 10 has had COVID and nobody had a symptom, but highly unlikely. So in other words, if I have antibodies by now, it's because I got vaccine and not the placebo. And I just was one of the lucky ones that had no side effects to the vaccine as well. And it seems because someone from Johnson and Johnson, because I'm, me and have a big enough platform, someone saw that I got into the trial and just, slid into my DMs. Hey, I work at J&J and work on the trials. If you have any questions, let me know. And I was like, can I have the vaccine and not the placebo, please? They're like, no, we can't pull strings for you.
Sorry,
like,
we can't ruin our entire study just because you're famous.
Like, please, I'm not famous enough for them to do that for me. But no, here's the thing. Like, I would have been pretty mad if they'd said yes, like, because that would have been because that would have told me like that they could go into the data, because like this told me that nobody could go into the data and screw with it. Nobody could make an exception for someone. Like, I liked that. I'm mad that I don't know that I had the vaccine, but I'm also like, this lets me tell everyone who follows my site that they couldn't even they couldn't guarantee for me, who would have been able to say, yeah, they could let me have the vaccine. No matter what, they could not screw with that, the integrity of it. Not even to let, not even for the sake of having somebody tell people what the vaccine felt like. And I think that's a really good thing. Someone said, "Oh, you're SciComm famous." That guys, like, there's no social currency in being Facebook famous. I want you to understand this. Like, I don't walk into a bar and get a free drink for being Facebook famous, partially because I don't walk into bars right now. Okay. Like, there's no one's like, like, actually I have to, the most I've been recognized in my entire life was at the AVNs this last year. It's so going to the porn awards was where I was recognized more than anywhere else in my life, which was very strange. So I don't know what that means for me, but actually, like, I've been recognized more when I've been at skeptic conferences, obviously, but like, that's because those are people that went there specifically to see me. But yeah, I was recognized 5 times at the AVNs, which was very strange. I still don't know. I don't know what to make of that. My podcast co-host was there with me, and we're looking at each other the whole time, like, what? Huh? How did this happen? Anyways, Kristen Vassetti said, "I would buy you a drink if I saw you. I just Diet Coke. That's all I ever want." It's the
best of drinks.
I'm very SciComm. It's all I ever wanted, guys. So this is a really good question from JK. So getting off the subject of me being Facebook. I'm huge in Canada, guys. Is there any truth to the claim that running PCR testing up to 40 cycles overinflates the number of people infected? I see this floating around, and the ancillary claim is that at such a high cycle count, you can end up detecting remnants of viral DNA, but does not indicate that someone is currently infected. Gid, do you have any insight on this one, or is this out of your wheelhouse? I'm not sure.
Well, so actually, I didn't know much about PCR testing, but people were making a bunch of claims about it. So I went and I asked a virologist and a pathologist about them, or a couple of pathologists and an immunologist as well. And I wrote a blog about this idea that there are many, many false positives being produced for COVID.
If you can shoot me the link to that, I'll post it to my Facebook page after we're done with this.
Sure thing. I will find it. Yeah, so basically, it's something of a false claim. That it's very complicated, which is the problem. Using many cycles of a PCR means that you've taken a very small fragment of viral RNA and you've magnified it millions and millions of times. So what you can do, it makes the testing incredibly sensitive, which means it picks up pretty much anyone who has had the disease. Even if they only have a tiny little bit of the virus inside in their throat or wherever the swab is taken from, you can still see that viral RNA. But the downside to this is, so the upside, there's a big upside, which is that people who've only just been infected and still only have tiny numbers of the virus before it started replicating, you can still often pick them up with PCR. Which is great. It's not better than other methods of diagnosing people. The downside is that if people were infected weeks or even sometimes months ago, you can sometimes still get small fragments of viral RNA that PCR will pick up. So the question is, it certainly doesn't give you false positives, because these people were people who were recently infected with disease or may in fact still be infectious. It's hard to tell. And it doesn't necessarily make the test inaccurate in any way. What it's saying is that these people were infected and potentially are still infectious, but can't be sure, even if they don't have symptoms anymore.
And that's why in some cases we're getting quote false positives, meaning people that aren't infectious anymore but had it, and it's hard to tell with these cases of quote long COVID when people stop being infectious. And it's like, and that's why they've kind of put an arbitrary cutoff of 20 days after people, like it's really hard to tell in some cases when people stop being infectious with this. And is there, like, they've given kind of a standard for people who have mild cases and a standard for people who have more severe cases on 10 and 20 days from initial diagnosis. I think that's correct at this point.
Something like it varies from place to place, depending on your local public health authority and what kind of risk they're willing to accept.
That makes me feel really assured about all of this.
Well, no, the thing is, because it's not a hard and fast answer. There are some people who will probably still be infectious after 30 days after they were started experiencing symptoms, and there will probably be some people who stopped being infectious a day or two after. It's like it's a distribution rather than a fixed value.
That makes sense.
Yeah, depending on what level of risk you're willing to accept of people who think that they are no longer infectious mixing with the public is where your local public health authority will set that guideline. The other thing I'll mention is what I was told across the board is that in most labs, if you run more than 35 or even 30 cycles of PCR to come up with a positive result, it will be, the test is usually redone. It'll be discussed at the pathology rounds. You know, they'll go, is this a true positive? Are we sure? Could it be contamination, et cetera, et cetera. So they're really careful with that sort of test.
Wow. No, that's fantastic. So there are a bunch of really good questions just came in. Now we have a few documented cases of this. Melissa Noctis asked, is there any evidence to prove that you can be infected with COVID more than once? And there have been a few documented cases of this now. The most recent one being, I believe, a 25-year-old man, or the most recent one in the U.S. being a 25-year-old man that was reinfected back in either June or July. What have your observations been regarding reinfection?
So absolutely, people have been reinfected. I think that's been demonstrated quite well now, that there are people who've had the disease more than once. The usual way of doing this is to look at the virus sample that they had the first time and the virus sample they had the second time, and test the DNA or RNA and see if they're different. And I believe there are at least 10 cases where that's been demonstrated. And it's not unexpected if you look at other coronaviruses, and this is based on the work of a virologist from Australia called Ian McKay, who I think is great.
He's fantastic. He's one of my favorite follows on Twitter. So.
I was going to say, follow him on Twitter.
Yeah.
So
lots of fantastic. It's science Twitter from Australia is my favorite science Twitter. Just extra highly concentrated science, good scientists. Moving on. Sorry, carry on.
Aside from coal, it's our biggest export, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, so most coronaviruses that we have circulating at the moment, you can be reinfected with, usually after 3 to 6 years, but sometimes earlier than that. And so it's not unexpected that COVID you would be able to be reinfected with. It's almost certain that a proportion of people who catch the disease will catch it again. We don't know what proportion that is, and that's the real key question, because if it's 0.00001%, which is like what we've observed so far, that's not an issue. If it's 10%, like with other coronaviruses, that's a big issue.
Oof. Yikes. So it's just that because it's endemic and because it's out there and we're paying so much attention to it is why we're seeing these cases and freaking out about the possibility of there being a low chance of immunity. And it seems like most people are going to be immune, at least for some time, once they either get this or get the vaccine. So that's what we want people to concentrate on, is what's the likely scenario for after you either get sick or get the vaccine. And the likely scenario is that you'll probably be granted at least some immunity. Yes.
So this is the interesting point, because what we see in the news and what we really observe is people who have reinfections that are severe, or at least that are fairly severe, because you don't notice if you have a very mild infection necessarily.
And I've read I've read the reverse for some cases though. Is that true?
Oh, so some cases are less severe than the first infection, but there's still people who notice that they're sick, who have symptoms, and then go get tested, right? So there's probably a larger pool of people for whom the second infection was completely unnoticeable and basically lived their lives as normal, right?
Yeah, they probably had they might have had a second completely asymptomatic case.
Precisely. And so the question is, what we would expect is that if you get infected more than a second or third time, you probably will have a less severe disease, and that's from other diseases as well as coronaviruses. Oh. So it might also be good news depending on how reinfections go, because if you get infected once and then any infection after that is like really mild, then all you need to do is get vaccinated and you will probably never have a severe case, which is not bad news.
Fingers crossed I got the vaccine. I keep crossing my fingers. I'm like, I just want some of those. Look, I was willing to take an untested vaccine to get the Clearly, I'm at my breaking point at the 6-month mark. Moving on. So there was a question. So my contacts are blurring up a little bit, and I'm getting bad at reading the names because they're a little grayed out on the screen. So I apologize. But here's a question of: is it true that some people are more contagious than others when infected? And parentheses super spreaders. Do we know why? Now, my understanding is that it's not that individual people have different biology causing them to be super spreaders, but it's the behavior and them going into situations that cause super spreading events. Is that what our current understanding is, or am I wrong on this?
I think we don't really know is the anscer there. Basically, everyone's proposed their favorite theory. It's hard to demonstrate.
I like. Here's the thing: ambiguity means that we're going to find new shit out. That's fantastic. So I thought I knew a thing, and this means I get to learn a new thing now. So,
it's just hard to know because, if you look at super spreading events, you can make inferences and you can say, well, if I pick these super spreading events, these are the things that I think caused it. But it could be because those people were very, very contagious. It could be that the situation that they were in was conducive to spreading. I've seen lots of people spread around lots of theories, and I've yet to be convinced, I think.
It could be that somebody it could be that you have these two people that you put them into the same types of giant events that could cause a super spreader event, one of whom would not spread their germs, one of whom would, the exact same way. And we just don't know yet. And it's I don't know how ethical it is to I read or I listened to a thing on This Week in Virology where they were talking about ways that they could test contagiousness, and they were using a certain type of hamster that they had found that they determined could catch and spread COVID-19, and that was how they were testing contagiousness of I think one of the new strains of COVID to see how much more contagious it was than the first strain. So that's how they've been testing contagiousness, and super spreading has been with hamsters. So, I don't think we're quite at the point with the hamsters of testing super spreading events yet. I want
hamster choirs.
It's damn it. Look. They just need a little encouragement. We just can't hear the music in our ears. It's there. It's there.
Just very high pitched. Yeah, both of us are too old, I think, to hear the above. What's that frequency thing?
It's. Instead of a dog whistle, it's a hamster whistle. we just need to listen to them. The hamster music is there in their hearts. Someone commented like Sturgis. Oh, that's a good point. It's funny. So remember the Sturgis study that came out, and for about 5 minutes, all of us were like, see, and we were finger wagging because we were like 250,000 of you got COVID, and I fell for that for 5 seconds because I'm not an epidemiologist, and you were one of the people if I recall correctly, who was like, this study isn't on the level because it wasn't. But now here's something interesting in the northern Midwest in the U.S. It seems like COVID is kind of spread far and wide, and the main thing that seems to be the culprit from this, the connecting event, was Sturgis. Even if it wasn't, the 250,000 cases that people were trying to pin on it initially, that seems to have caused it. do you have you looked into this at all, or do you have any observations on this, or is this something that's outside of what you've been focusing on?
Well, so when you say northern Midwest, I have to think about my U.S. geography.
Sorry, like middle, like it's. Yeah, I apologize for that.
Like, so, I know Washington, California is the West. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Sturgis, North Dakota. Just think middle, just think middle of the country, little south of Canada.
Okay. So it's the problem with that study, basically, I think that they demonstrated fairly convincingly that there was an increase in cases associated with the rally. But the problem was that they didn't demonstrate very well the specific figure. The 250,000, the headline figures. So I don't think it's necessarily ridiculous to say that a proportion of the cases that are currently, or the large number of cases that are currently being seen is down to the rally. But putting a number on that's what I think is really hard,
Yeah, that's understandable. It's interesting. Like right now, the main, it's like, for earlier on in the pandemic, we've seen it mainly in the larger cities in the U.S., and now it seems to have it's traveled into the suburbs and the smaller towns and the less populated areas. So, and it's suspected that a lot of that has come from things like Sturgis, like small family gatherings, and not someone. Sorry, someone just distracted me with the comments. Back to the Diet Coke.
Always.
Look. I'm a well-known Diet Coke junkie, and there was Diet Pepsi on sale last week, and Diet Coke was on sale as well. But they did not have, the entire suite of Coke products was on sale, but they did not have Diet Coke, and I was not going to drink regular, and so I bought Diet Pepsi, and I have regrets. Yeah. So I have happiness now and not regrets. So I'm just trying to scroll up and grab a few questions. Let's see. Here's a good one. I'm just trying to unhide it so I can read it first. Let's see. Loving this, but in regards to second infection, usually immunity helps, except dengue. Second strain causes enhanced immunity response when infected with second serotype. Second serotype, there was some evidence of this in lab for C19. Have you seen other recent studies confirming or rejecting this, or is it too early to know?
No idea. Sorry, I'd have to look that up.
I appreciate both a concise answer and one that says that it's and one that admits to not knowing a thing, because that is a thing that I have to do frequently. Someone commenting on the Diet Coke being a plastic bottle. Guys, I can't fix it. Sometimes that's what's on sale. Complaints about Tab being retired. Do you have any thoughts on Tab being retired, Gid?
On Tab. I don't really have that in Australia, so it hasn't impacted me as much. The last time I saw Tab, I think, was a childhood holiday in South Africa. It's the closest. Because I grew up in England, and then I moved to Australia, and I don't think either country really has that drink.
So Tab's never been this is not a deep moment of sadness in your life?
No, well, I mean, for other reasons maybe, but not because of my choice of soft drink.
I don't know if I've ever had Tab in my entire life, so I should probably try one. Here's a question: do I try it now just to say I have, or not try it so that I don't have deep sadness when it leaves? Because what if I try it and then I'm out a thing that I deeply love? That would be bad.
Look, I mean, I guess as it's a risk benefit you'll have to weigh up.
Look, these are the look. I'm stuck inside. I have nothing I can do right now other than venture occasionally to the store to find a soft drink. This is the only entertainment I have at the moment. So it's it's yesterday. I'm having it's confession time to my audience. Mrs. Auntie Cybabe has been having a very depressed, weepy week because it's just it's 6 month point of the pandemic. The elections are around the corner. Everything about the election is just making this worse and more stressful because you wake up at 3 and you roll over because your dog is kicking you because that's the thing your dog does, and it's 3 a.m. You're like, I may as well. The news is already happening on the East Coast. I'm gonna wake up and check what's happening, and you doom scroll control, and it makes you more tired and more depressed. And you're like, I just want this goddamn election to be over so I can feel sane. I can feel sane again. And then you realize maybe I won't feel sane again because this country's not going back to normal. This isn't going to be okay. The pandemic isn't going to be over. The vaccines aren't going to be distributed for another 9 months, and you keep being tired and tearful, and it's bad. And that's where I am this week. So,
well, I can empathize to some extent. As someone on my timeline on Twitter said, as a Dutch person, I hate that I know the name of the American president's children, and I agree. I don't even know the names of the Australian prime minister's children because no one cares here.
Shit. Like I should
not an issue.
Like I know the name of the Postmaster General. Well, I have never known the name of a Postmaster General. Like, I barely knew that was the name of a government position before. I think that unless you're a political science major or someone who works in government, you should not know that. And I'm not saying you should try to be dumb about who works in your government, but why the fuck should I, a science communicator, know the name of a Postmaster General?
Why should I, as an Australian, know the name of White House political advisors? I don't care. Usually,
you've heard the name Kayleigh McEnany, probably.
Yes, that's
why
familiar.
Should you know that name? You shouldn't know that name. It's like the more names you know in a political administration, the worse things are going. Like, I do not remember the name of the press secretary in the Obama White House, and I was a political junkie. I've been a political junkie probably since college. Like, this is 20 years. Oh my God, I'm old. I've earned my Botox. This has been 20 years of being a political junkie. I don't remember the name of the press secretary from Obama's time in college. I remember 2 of the Bush press secretaries. And here's the thing. I just remember the press secretary, though. I don't remember a lot of the other positions in the Bush White House. I know like 3 of the different Department of Defense. Like there have been like replacements for so many people in the Trump administration, and I remember them all because they all went down in flames. This is not it's not normal for, as you said, people outside the U.S. to know this many people. Like, Americans don't normally know this many people in their administration, and it's because it's the greatest show on earth. And that's not what politics should be. They should just be like, hey, maybe we should get like money and healthcare to people right now during a pandemic.
Well, you kind of hope, yeah.
Oh, sorry for going off on that tangent, but it's not one of my live streams unless we have a quick mental breakdown.
That's okay. Ironically enough, this year is one of the only times that I'm reasonably up on American politics.
There's nothing reasonable about American politics, which is why you have to keep up with them. To be fair, like, I'm not keeping up with, like, or at least until this year, I wasn't keeping up with a lot of European politics, and then it turned, like, a lot of European countries are turning into, or have at least in some degree, they're having authoritarian uprisings. So it is it behooves one to have at least to have a passing knowledge of what's happening in other countries at this point in at these unprecedented times. You know what I want? I would like some precedented times. That'd
be ideal, right?
I would like deeply precedented. I want newscasters to be like, hey, you know what today was like? Nice. We've seen this all before. This has been predictable as fuck. I knew what was going to happen today. All the things that we thought were happening, they went through. This is normal as fuck. Back to you, Tom. Like, that's what I want for like a month, maybe dare to dream a day. I would take a day. There are going to be history PhD students 20 years from now doing their theses on individual days of October of this year. Like, it baffles my mind that like October 3rd through 10th was like there were individual hours of that week that I can't remember all the news that went down. Like Kimberly Guilfoyle, there was a huge scandal that dropped about her. And then, like, an hour later, people had forgotten about it because we found out Trump had COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to go back to writing my usual science blogs about, like, whether artificial sugar is killing you or whether the latest study funded by Big Blueberry, but that would be so much less depressing than COVID.
God, I think one of the hardest parts about this has been fighting the amount, just the fire hose of fake news that's been coming down the pike about this. And I think that's part of why it's been hard as people who we normally debunk fake news. This is like catnip to us partially. Like it's not even the political side of it. It's just, how do you stay away from something that's just like, ooh, there's stuff to debunk. Can't part of it is it feels futile, and part of it is it feels like you can't not help when you see this much bad information that could hurt people.
Yeah, but I find it also a bit depressing, because it's usually you get at least some fun stuff. Like there was a study last year where Walnut Growing Association funded a study into nuts being good for sperm. So I got to write the line that Big Nut is supporting Big Nut, which I found great. It was a delightful blog to write. Still one of my highlights.
It's like I feel like if the study I feel like if the study turned out to be bunk, you could be like Big Nut Blue One for Big Nut.
Yes. Well, it was a terrible study. I should update that actually.
We blew a big nut. It's
the puns write themselves.
I just as a person who reviews porn for a part-time living, I am a professional porn reviewer now. Professional. Look, the secret to reviewing porn is that you don't watch all the sex. Like, this is what people are reviewing porn with the plot. Like, the only time you ever keep watching the sex scenes is if they stay in character. Very few actors stay in character. There are a couple of them, and we've birthed from this. Like, we go off on tangents on the show because otherwise the apocalypse would be very boring. The only way there is from the porncast, we have birthed this thing called the Horat Challenge. Are you ready for this horrifying thing that I'm about to dump on you? So we watched the Borat parody, Horat, and the actor in this, Tommy Pistol, who is easily the best actor in porn. He's SAG-AFTRA, he does mainstream acting, and also happens to be able to act while throwing his dick into things. When I say things, I mean literal things. He got an ABN award one year for fucking a couch. Like, literally a couch. They built a couch for him to. Anyways, but he played Horat in the Borat parody, and it's from this we decided, because people were like, "There's acting in porn." We're like, just you wait. So when you're at one point in that moment with your partner, and things are getting really hot and things are wonderful, and you've lost yourself in that wonderful moment, just try to pull yourself out of that moment just long enough mentally to be able to say, "Very nice." and if you can, and you can still, everyone can still just to keep it going like nothing happens, you get to say there's no acting in porn. But if you can't, you have to admit there's acting in pornography. So that is the Horat Challenge, and so far I believe we've only gotten a few emails from people saying that they have attempted successfully and stuck the landing. But like, if people could try it out and stick the landing, I implore you, people who are watching this and expected to come to this for epidemiology, please email us info@twogirls1mic, all spelled out twogirls1mic.com. Anyways, that's the Horat Challenge. I hope I haven't horrified you too much.
That sounds like fun.
I
don't think I'm going to give it a go, though, unfortunately.
I know. That's the thing is, I don't think that most people would, and that is why I say there is acting in porn.
Yeah,
so,
fair.
Anyways, my apologies. I'm sorry / you're welcome to the to the viewing audience out there as he's scrolling back up to the question. So I see one that's a good one, though. Seriously, what is your estimate of the longevity of COVID-19 pandemic, mask wearing, distancing, impacts on economy and behavior? Well, that's a big question to answer. But I mean, it's like, here's the question that how to break this one down into a more digestible question. So when do we think that the vaccine's going to come out to start with? I mean, and that's kind of like when the pandemic is going to start to end, right?
Yeah, I mean, the easy out to the question in general is I don't know, but in terms of
an honest answer, and we like that.
I think we'll probably have phase 3 studies, all going to plan. We'll have phase 3 studies reporting early next year, given the number of phase 3 studies. So for anyone who doesn't know, vaccines and most drugs are studied in phases. The first phase is tiny, and you just give it to a few people, make sure it doesn't kill them. Then you give it to a few more people and make sure it actually activates an immune response. Then you give it to tons of people in a final phase in a randomized fashion to see if it actually works. Yeah. And so those studies of whether it actually works, which you're a part of.
Yep, I'm in phase. I'm one of 60,000 and something was shot into my arm.
Are being conducted and finished now. We won't have the problem with phase 3 studies is they're usually planned for 2 years. We won't have 2-year data for 2 years because time is linear. It's a terrible burden for us all. But we will have a reasonable amount of 6-month data from these enormous studies very soon, or in the next 2 to 6 months. Now, we won't know about long-term potential harms of the vaccine, but those tend to be extremely rare, even in vaccines that we've licensed. Given that, I think a lot of governments will start to take the harm reduction approach that the likely benefits of a vaccine are very large, the likely detriments of a vaccine are quite small, as long as it's passed these minimal safety checks at the 6-month mark. And we'll start seeing some places give a vaccine. And I suspect, optimistically, that will start happening early next year, although it is hard to say because there are still a lot of barriers in the way that could potentially upset that. Then the question is, what are the long-term outlook from having a vaccine? And that's a challenging question because I think a lot of people have painted vaccines as this instant solution, but a lot of the vaccines are only going to do things like reduce the severity of the disease, or they'll be 70 or 80% effective, not 100% effective. Vaccines are also really hard to roll out. I mean, I was talking to an academic the other day who was like, well, why do people think we can roll a vaccine out to the entire United States when we can't even get one federal public health response to COVID?
This is something that I find interesting. People keep saying, what are we going to do about the anti-vaxxers with the vaccine? I'm like, why do you think we're even going to have to convince them on day one? We're not going to have 300 million doses ready to go on day one of this. It's going to be like 2 years before we have to start convincing people, like before we have enough to start convincing people. So it's going to be really hard to coordinate this between people who are begging for it and people who are the most at risk. Like and the other thing is, and I mean, I know you're in Australia and you're probably focusing on how rollout is going to work there. And in the US, there's a reason why I regularly implore people, that we have to try to make sure that this is less of a nightmare. And please vote, because the way that this gets distributed is going to be affected by who's in office in the spring. So please do what you can to make this less of a nightmare and vote. And please make sure that you're registered. And please, if you have the option to send your ballot off, send it right away. That's all I'm asking, because that is a big question of who is, who's going to be in charge of the distribution. But you're right that we have been looking at this as the thing that's going to end it. And unfortunately, as much as Contagion did, the movie Contagion, which I love and definitely doom watched over and over again, did a fairly good job of showing the steps of a pandemic ending. But it was a great feel good moment in the movie when the vaccine arrived, not and didn't quite show the long term way that a vaccine is going to end up being rolled out in reality.
I think some places will probably roll it out really well. In New South Wales, where I live, in Sydney, we've got this amazing vaccine network.
Nice.
We have one of the highest vaccination rates of anywhere in the world, and there are places like that in the US as well. I think there are places where vaccines will probably be distributed really quickly and really well, and then there are places where it probably won't. And but anyway, in terms of the long-term outlook of the pandemic, I think basically my answer is we'll probably be living with COVID to some extent for quite some time. How long that is really hard to say.
Yeah, that's yeah, basically it's like it's another one of the good question we don't know. But it's better to say we don't know than what that it's sorry to bring it back to politics every time, kids, but then what our president in the US has been saying every time of it'll go away like a miracle. We're going to have something momentarily. We're going to have a vaccine before the election. Like this is a much more honest approach with people and saying, hey, these things are unpredictable. It's going to be a while. Here's how a vaccine's expected to work. Let's temper expectations and tell people a truth that sometimes can be hard to hear, and is more accurate to expectations. And these are why I bring you on the show.
Thank you. Well, I'll put it this way. As an example, as an epidemiologist, I booked tickets to Hamilton in Sydney next June, and I am not sure if I will go.
That's a good way of looking at it. Like I know that there are skeptic groups that are starting to like put together conferences for next year. I'm like, if anyone, like, there are people who have asked me, are you going to speak? Are you considering speaking and anything? I'm like, I'm not considering shit until I have a vaccine in my arm. And I know that vaccine is at least 90% effective. Like, just 90, I might be shooting the moon on that, but like, I need to know that there's a vaccine out, it's effective, and people have to be vaccinated to go to a thing like this. Like it's not just it's not a good idea.
But speaking of Skepticon 2020 Australia, you can stay up till, I guess, 2, 3 a.m. and skeptical conferences being done via the internet.
It's like it's one of those things. It just feels so depressing thinking all the time. Like
in 3 days.
It's and this part is one. I had so much fun when I went to Skepticon in Sydney. Like it's everyone there is. It's the people. This is just me plugging. Go watch. I'm burnt out on Zoom. I'm burnt out on being on the interwebs until like I enjoy doing this, but I'm also like, after I'm done doing my after I'm done doing the whole like being in front of people for this, I'm like, I gotta go and hide. I need to be around real humans. This is fake interaction and I can't do it anymore. Like I never thought I would miss going to conferences this much, and I do, because it's real humans in meat space. And I'm kind of for the amount that I talk, and I get it. I talk a lot and I talk too fast. I miss people so fucking much, and I'm really an introvert. And it's at that point, I think, of the pandemic, of even introverts are like, this is too much introvert for me.
I feel you so hard. I had 2 fully funded trips overseas, including one to Chicago in the US this year planned, and obviously pandemic put paid to that.
It's so, man, just pandemic is just like, hey, everything you wanted in life this year, hold on a second. We had other plans. So fun story. So this, I'm streaming to a couple different platforms from Restream, as you guys who are my regulars know. And it seems like every time, because I go to, this is over at Facebook, Periscope, Twitch, and YouTube. It seems like Periscope is where the trolls always arrive. And it's always someone saying, there's a 99% survival rate. Why are you taking such a big deal? Why don't we want the infection rate higher so that people get immune to this? All right, like, this is, I like I said, I say don't get distracted by the trolls, and then I'm the one who gets distracted by the trolls. But no, we don't want the infection rate high, because the more people we can prevent from getting this, the more people until we get a vaccine, the more people we can prevent from having long-term health effects from this, which is a thing that we seem to be seeing quite a bit. Now, we don't know the overall rate of long-term chronic illness that people are getting from this, but do we have any estimates, or is this another thing that you're going to tell me we don't know? Or do we have, like I said, do we have an estimate at all?
Well, so I've got a long-running email chain with a bunch of infectious diseases experts and epidemiologists, where we were going to try and do a study to answer this question. And basically, at this point, there isn't sufficient evidence to make a really good statement. I think there's increasingly, so there are definitely harms that we know about for people who have serious hospitalizations, and you go on ECMO or you're ventilated. ECMO is so
extracorporeal something.
Yeah, I can't remember what the acronym stands
mechanical
for.
oxygen.
Yes, so they reoxygenate your blood without your lungs and heart.
Between the two of us, we're captain. I know the name of a thing. Yeah,
brilliant. Love medical acronym. Anyway, so if you're in ICU for a month, whatever. There are harms associated with that, regardless of which disease you have. So if sufficient people go to hospital and are put on ECMO, lots of them will be harmed. Those long-term harms we know about quite well. The long-term harm specific to COVID, we can only guess at this point because it hasn't been long-term. And the type of study that you need to do to the long-term cohort studies of people who catch COVID and follow them up, it just takes a while. So there are estimates. There are people who are, and there's long COVID in the UK demonstrating that there are people who experience symptoms many months after. What it means at this point is hard to say.
Long COVID is the thing that, like, I'm at my age and health and number of / type of comorbidities, I am not scared of dying of this. And I think most people my age who are being cautious of, let's see, who are, you know, taking appropriate precautions for this. I don't think most of us my age are afraid of dying from this. I think we're afraid of long COVID. Like the thought of suffering for 3 months on end and waking up in the morning and being like, I can barely move out of bed without wanting to go right back to it, and having a chronic fever and all of the things that we've been warned come with chronic COVID. Like, yeah, there's a reason why people are afraid of this. Like it's not like it's not that death doesn't scare me. It's just that death seems so much less likely than all the other things that could affect me for the rest of my life, which is kind of terrifying with this thing that's airborne. So it's so quick. Somebody asked, sorry, my contacts are at that point where they're fogging up. Mario asks, can you talk about the Marsburg virus? I like hearing about viruses. Is this something that's in your wheelhouse at all?
I love the question, and I would love to talk about viruses. That's one that I haven't really studied, so I can't tell you very much. Apologies.
So here's a more fun one.
The viruses other than COVID that I tend to know about are vaccine preventable ones, because I was going to do a PhD in vaccine preventable disease at one point.
Nice.
But I don't know that much about the non-vaccine preventable ones, or the ones that aren't major in Australia, at least. Well,
this is a more fun question. How likely is a zombie apocalypse?
I mean, as ever, it's never a non-zero possibility.
Hey, that is a scientifically accurate answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I was a Bayesian, I could put a prior probability estimate on the distribution of whether we're going to be overcome by zombies right now.
Look, I like to say right now we're in a sort of zombie apocalypse. We're in an information. We're being, never mind. My joke was not going to work. I apologize. Sometimes, like in my mind, I'm like, if I throw this in the right direction, the joke's going to work. And then I see there are no tracks for the train to go down after I start pushing the train, and I'm like, take it. Gotta backtrack that one a little bit. Oh,
see, I solved that problem by just not being very funny. It's a brilliant solution.
But here's the thing: if you have any, like, to Americans, if you have any non-American accent, you're automatically funnier. Like they'll give you much more leeway. Like, I don't know how that works, but just a standard American accent, they're like, sorry. It's just you accent it up, and they're like, ooh, you're just you get, like, it's like smoking makes you look 15% cooler, like an accent 15% funny or sexy or anything. Like,
I'm glad to know. In Australia, my accent just makes me sound normal.
it's like it adds 2 inches of height and 20% of funny. Like it's just, that's all you need. Like that. Just if ever, like there's my ramble.
Get rid of all degrees is what you're saying. I don't need science.
It's like people. Here, fun story. So I'm from the Boston area originally, and somehow I've escaped having a Boston accent, except for when I'm very angry, and then somehow I turn into the most Bostonian person you've ever. Anyways, but the Boston accent in the U.S. comes across as really uneducated, and people will listen, even though a Southern accent, people think of Southerners as it's an accent that is associated with being less educated, but people will hear the exact same words coming out of a person coming from a Southern accent and coming from a Boston accent, and they will think it is right coming from a Southern accent or an English accent or standard American accent, and they'll think it's wrong for coming from a Boston accent because it sounds uneducated. So accents are a funny thing.
They are. They're so strange.
Yeah, it's there is my random talk on accents. So somehow my mom's first language was French, and from that she cannot do any accents in English. She has a fairly standard American English, and cannot, like, if she heard your accent, she wouldn't be able, like, she'd be like, I don't know, maybe it's South African, maybe it's Irish, maybe it's English, I don't know. She cannot tell any of them apart.
That's great.
it's just I think that's a strange thing that happens. I think when your first language is not the language that you use most, and you just So there's my mom. Sorry, I'm outing your weirdest quirk with language. My mom's watching this right now, so but it's like it's just just I don't know. You hear her and she sounds like this is her first language because she started speaking it when she was, I think, 4 or 5, but cannot identify any or any accents other. I think she can identify like a New York accent and a Southern accent, and that is it.
Look, to be fair, I don't know if I could identify accents from different parts of France or from like French Canadian versus French.
This is very, very true. That is, and I think that's the thing that I don't even that like I don't think about, but it's also like I'm like, Mom learned English when she was 5. Like hasn't it? I thought that would be in her brain, but you know what? I'm also wrong. So anyways, moving on. So let's see. People are talking about different ways of testing to keep people safe. Let's see. Hawaii has implemented a pre-travel testing where visitors can avoid quarantining if they test negative within 72 hours of boarding their flight to Hawaii. Could these travelers be exposed to the virus by travelers who didn't expect to do the quote pre-travel testing approach, become infectious and then become infectious during their stay in Hawaii?
Oh, that's a long question. I guess.
It's like it's like it seems like a thing that could happen. Like, of course, someone could get infectious on the flight, but like, does it seem like enough of a precaution to limit it to a point between mask wearing and everything?
So the challenge in terms of testing for people who are about to travel is that even though the PCR tests are great, they have a relatively low sensitivity when people have only just been infected. So if you have been exposed the day before and are going to develop an infection, a PCR test has a lower sensitivity in that it may not pick up your disease. So I get this is another question where it's like the science says something, but we have to decide on policy rather than science, because policy isn't necessarily about science. It's about what sort of risks you're willing to accept. And as a scientist who works in policy, I always find it fun. But so in this context, probably I would say in answer to the question, yes, there are probably people who would test negative and then potentially be exposed and be infected, or potentially who test negative but are in fact infected, but they test negative because of the test and the limitations. Is that a risk that Hawaii is willing to accept? Well, I don't live there and I can't really speak for Hawaii.
That is a working explanation.
And also how big that risk is, I think, is debatable. Yeah. I would say it's probably relatively small, but given how large the outbreaks are in the US, it probably isn't that small if you're coming from certain places in the US.
Yeah. The outbreak in the U.S. is it's endemic at this point. It's everywhere and it's all around us, and it feels like there's no escaping it. Like there have been two articles in the LA Times on how there is an outbreak at USC like within 3 blocks of me because of the students partying. So I go to the grocery store and I'm like, okay, don't touch anything, don't breathe on anything, don't let anyone breathe on me, duck and cover if there are students. And they're not even having classes at USC. The students just showed up. They're like, I just want that college experience of people breathing on me.
Look, to be fair, I avoid touching students anyway. I think it's generally a reasonable policy. Given how awful I was as a student, it's just those memories.
It's funny because at the beginning of the school year, I was really mad at them for just like, because like I'm right in the middle of the USC area, and there's like student housing all around me, and I was mad every night that I would hear partying going on. And part of it is that like this is partially the responsibility of the school for being like, yeah, let's have them back in. It's cool. Like 18-year-olds are totally going to be on this. They're going to understand germ theory and they're going to behave responsibly, even though adults adults with mortgages and 401ks are not behaving. We can trust them. Like, and I was not as mad at the school as I was the 18-year-olds. And now I realize I was mad at the wrong person because like somehow a school full of this institution full of alleged scholars did not understand that 18-year-olds were going to 18-year-olds. world, and this is what's been happening. And I can hear back when I started doing these live streams. I had a much less my sound system was just it was I was doing these via my iPhone, and people could hear the partying from next door. Like, that's how loud it was. And it's, God damn it, the schools that have had students back in and have had outbreaks, I'm like, what did they expect? They couldn't have thought this was going to end differently.
Yeah, but, I mean, if I was 18 and someone told me that I had a low risk of dying if I caught a deadly virus, I would be like, let's party.
Yeah, I don't think that I would have been any smarter. I'm at one point I think I was like, I would have followed the rules when I never followed I definitely would have been an idiot and been like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll get my immunity. I'll get immunity and I'll stay home. It'll be cool. Like, we all want to think we would have been the good kid. Most of us would, just judging by statistics, statistically about half of us, at least half of us would have sucked. So looking back, we can't go, I would have, nah.
I think we can all agree that we were all idiots at 18, and therefore it's fair to assume.
Yeah, it's like I was an idiot at 25, more than likely, and I'm I'm Facebook famous for being smart. So I'm just saying, if someone who is Facebook famous for being smart is sure they were dumb about a decade and a half ago, I'm just saying, think about how smart the average person was. We would have all most of us would have fucked it up when we were in college. That's how it goes. So it's like, I feel bad for the young persons that are in this situation, because they should have been given a society that didn't fuck up to the point where they had an endemic plague, in which their school was opening back up in which their school was opening.
Someone actually asked, I think I saw it pop up, what the difference between pandemic, epidemic, and endemic are.
That is a really good question.
It was a while ago, I think.
Yeah. Oh, let's let it please give the explanation. Yeah.
So endemic is a disease in which there is local transmission. The case in which there is local transmission of a disease. So where there is circulating amounts of the disease. For example, in Australia, we have endemic hepatitis B because there are people who transmit it to other people within the country. And this is, as opposed to a case where a disease is not endemic, usually it's termed eliminated. God, I always confuse eliminated and the other one. But basically, a case where you have no local transmission of the disease. So you have small outbreaks that happen and then die out, like we do with measles in Australia, because we have no endemic transmission.
Like there are the way I heard it phrased, because we have the four quote endemic coronaviruses. So the coronaviruses that are that we think of as common colds, those are endemic. So they're just circulating all the time, and they're around us, and we don't think of them as occurring as pandemics, because they're just kind of there, and you might bump into them at any given time. So that's kind of how I think of things that are endemic. They're always kind of out there.
Yes, and so measles, I actually remember, it has been eliminated from the United States as well. So there's considered not to be circulating measles that's from the United States. So there are outbreaks of measles, but it's not a disease where you've got people passing the disease on within the country.
It's not endemic. It's not Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so then an epidemic is a disease outbreak within a local area. The specific definition depends on where you live, because different people define it slightly differently, but basically that's the idea. And then a pandemic is a disease outbreak that goes across the world.
Gotcha. So endemic, always happening; epidemic, localized outbreak; pandemic, all over the place. And it's a new thing that I was about to say. And I mean, is there a chance, like right now, would we kind of describe because I know obviously COVID-19 is a pandemic. Would we describe the way that COVID-19 is happening in the US as endemic at this point? Because it seems kind of like it's shifted into that category, because we're not controlling it at all. It's just kind of floating everywhere, and we would have to shut down everything entirely to get it to stop floating like this.
So to a certain extent, it depends on your definition of endemic, but I think usually not, because COVID is still going through an epidemic. Okay. There's a very large outbreak that's increasing and accelerating in some places. Endemic usually is used to define the case where you've got a relatively small number of cases where people are passing the disease around in the background, I guess, is a good way to put it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
But I think it's likely, and this is something that has been said by quite a few people who I respect, including Ian MacKay again, that COVID will become endemic eventually. Given that immunity wanes to other coronaviruses over over a long period of time, it's likely that vaccines won't last for a lifetime, even if they do last for a certain period of time. So it's likely that there will always be some level of background transmission, even if it's not very much.
Someone just asked, is the word you're looking for in terms of instead of eliminate, were you looking for eradicate?
No, sorry, that's where I get confused. Eradicated means it's gone forever.
Yeah.
Eliminate. So the only diseases that have been eradicated are smallpox and rinderpest.
I didn't know rinderpest had been eradicated.
No one does.
Or it's wait no. Let me rephrase this.
It's a great trivia question.
I'd heard it, like I'm almost sure that like I'd heard of it being eradicated, but like it just was not a thing I thought of it as being, like, because the only thing I think of are human, like what?
The only people who know about rinderpest are cattle farmers.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that I know I'd read about it, but like I only think about diseases that affect humans being eradicated. So no, it's that is the thing to remember for when it shows up on trivia night, when we could have trivia nights again. But let's see, is it here's a good question that I think is gonna show, like I don't want to keep you forever. I want it when we've been doing this for about an hour, and I don't know what time it is over there. Let's try to close up on this. Is it possible to eradicate a disease like COVID-19, or will some form always be around? And I feel like your answer is going to be but let's talk about the what we know right now and what we think could be the course for the disease. Let's speculate a little. What's going to happen with what do you think could happen with the process to reduce and hopefully eliminate and eventually possibly eradicate this?
So I think it's something of an open question. COVID has a lot of factors that I think would make it difficult to eradicate. So firstly, there's the question of zoonotic transmission, because we know that people can pass COVID to some animals. Whether those animals can pass the disease back to people is an important and I think as yet unanswered question. But if they can, so if we can give the disease to cats and they can give it back to us, then you can't eradicate it. You can't really eradicate zoonotic diseases, it becomes orders of magnitude harder.
That makes sense.
This is actually the problem with guinea worm, fascinatingly. Guinea worm is a worm that it's this nasty parasite, infects people, causes very, very nasty disease in Africa. And it was thought to be eradicated because no humans had it, but it turned out that it started infecting dogs. And now because it's infected dogs, it makes it really hard to get rid of entirely. So if there's a zoonotic component to COVID, the point, much harder to eradicate. It's also true that we are likely to see some level of waning immunity, whether that's over the course of a year, of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we just don't know. If immunity to the disease wanes over time, even if you're vaccinated, and again, we don't know any of this, it might not be true, it might be true, then it becomes harder to eradicate again because people can be reinfected lots of times, a large proportion of people being reinfected. So yeah, my answer is it's really complicated.
Complicated is fine. This is a complicated topic, and we don't know for a lot of these, and that's kind of the case. We don't know if because I believe I read that the whatchamacallit, the mutation rate for this is about a third of that of the flu. So we're going to be able to stay on top of this a little better, but we're going to have to possibly update the vaccine for this regularly. Like we're more than likely, because of people having waning immunity, need to update the vaccine, or people are going to need boosters, and people are going to need partially because they're going to lose immunity, and partially because the disease itself is going to change. So it's going to be interesting seeing how we manage life in a post-COVID world, and then seeing, because it seems like we are going to keep on getting new coronaviruses that are going to become endemic as time goes on. We're going to have to keep all those programs to develop coronavirus vaccines are going to need to be restarted, hopefully when a new administration takes over, and it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out, and hopefully we'll have something in place to keep that gets this at least more tenable and more livable, so that once so that instead of living in a world where the president tells us learn to live with it, in a situation where we have no protection and no treatment for it, we're living in a world where we have a vaccine that at least brings it down to something that is only as dangerous as the flu, which is still deadly, but is much less dangerous for us. So we're hoping that at least a vaccine can get it down to that point, I think, is where we are. So that's the best we can do with the information we have right now, with the virus that we've only known about for a year, and and already being at a point where we have vaccines, that are in phase 3, which is pretty amazing, all things considered.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
The quickest time we went from having a newly identified virus or pathogen to a vaccine, I think, is 4 years for mumps.
Yeah, mumps was out in very short amount of time, and I mean 4 years was short compared to everything else, and this having a vaccine ready to shoot into someone's arm for testing in it's less than 6 months is insane.
Monumental.
I mean, it's showing what people can do when they work together, when they share information, when it's like, all right, all hands on cut, please, humanity's counting on you. And it was a vaccine that I was willing to be a test monkey for. So where we will see what happens with this, and hopefully we'll get back to our lives in the next year so that you can go see Hamilton and that I can go see my mom. Anyways, so we're wrapping up. We have a tradition on the show, and I always tell guests you can opt out of this if you want, but so a long time ago, we wanted to see if we could pass COVID via computer, and I took a dare to lick the computer screen. Would you like to join me in this tradition, or is this too weird for you?
I can try giving the computer screen a lick. Sure.
All right, come on 3. Come with me. All right, 1, 2, 3.
I don't know if I got the screen there.
Look, sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. The person who we had on last this weekend made out with the goddamn thing, and he's a lawyer. He's very fancy. So we get different reactions from different people. I think I've only had one person on who I was afraid to ask them, and I'm like, he just seemed, he was the most prim and proper person that I'd had so far. So either way, as you can see in the chat, the people have been given what they want. They're very happy. They're very happy with this. Look, this is just another data point in telling us that this is not a computer virus. This is for science. So thank you so much for joining me. I know that we had to work around schedules, and I'm not sure what time it is in Australia, so I'm not sure if I have you up very late or very early right now.
It is the morning.
Thank you so much for what time is it in the morning right now?
Now it's about 10 a.m.
Okay, so I didn't get you up too early. Whew. Anyways, thank you so much for hanging out with me. People are thrilled. Star Starling said you were awesome. Star just wanted to mention that Ben Shapiro's wife would love you, because God knows that she needs some excitement in her life, because it's not coming from Ben Shapiro, because she has a dry ass pussy. Sorry, we can't get through an episode without mentioning that. Anyways, thank you guys for joining. Where can people find? We obviously have mentioned on here that people can find you on Twitter at GidMK. Where can people find you around the internet?
You can find me also on Medium at GidMK, and I have a podcast, Sensationalist Science, which you can usually find on podcasting apps of various stripes.
Nice, excellent. So and you're also, I believe, a contributor or a contributing writer over at The Guardian. Yes. Yeah,
you can find my columns at The Guardian if you care to read.
Good times. And we do care to read. Anyways, thank you so much. I love you guys. I will, of course, be on here on Friday with another guest and with more discussions on all the things that are making our world terrifying right now. Please wear your masks, wash your hands. I love you guys, and I will see you on the Friday. And I was about to say I had another announcement, but that's a lie. I don't. Anyways, love you guys, and I will see you on Friday. Woo!